Much, Anne Marie, for joining us. Really excited about the project. I think I'm a product of Toronto district, so I grew up and I went to Dante Alighieri. I don't know what school you're at currently. Um,
Mother Teresa.
you're at Mother Teresa. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, so you're all the way on the far side of town, and they're rebuilding my high school right now, so they're starting that up right now. And your director came from Halton Catholic, where I'm from right now. So, Brendan, but when we were given this opportunity to discuss, Black excellence and heritage, it's something that me. I've been fortunate to have gone to Dante. I taught at St. Edmund Campion and Halton and Dufferin Peel, so predominantly Black schools, which you really get to see that equity lens quite a lot. And even here, I'm blessed at St. Francis. One of my colleagues, Mark Freeman, he just is a wealth of knowledge to help out because you sometimes, like I said, I'm fully, completely realize my privilege, and we want to make sure that we're aware of that. But what we can do to inspire, um, for me, students, my sons, what can we do to live in that equitable society? So that's the big thing for me. So thank you very much for your time. Just as a bit of a background of who I am. Do you have any questions or anything you want to add before I jump into the questions?
No, thank you for doing this project because it's the allies that are helping to make a difference. I think that's what's improved the most is the fact that, over time, it's the increase in allies
Yeah.
that have made a big impact. So thanks.
Well, no worries, no worries. Like I said, I think we always go with just a golden rule, right? Do unto others as do unto yourselves. And I think if that's the mantra, the one beatitude, let's go with that. So starting with Black excellence and heritage, tell us about yourself and your journey that led you to become a leader and a mentor of the Catholic faith in education.
Okay, so I'm not sure how far back you'd like me to go.
Whatever you feel comfortable with. Who inspired
Okay, so I do feel, though, being a student in the Toronto Catholic District School Board from kindergarten all the way to grade 12 has had a big impact and shaped who I am today. I did have an excellent school experience, both in elementary school and high school. I enjoyed school, learning new things, the extracurricular activities that I was a part of. So I felt cared for, I felt supported by my teachers, and I felt that my teachers were good examples of faith in action. So participating in church, like in the daily rituals, and it really helped strengthen my faith. And I have so many great, vivid memories of my school days in elementary and high school. So when I entered into teaching, though, it wasn't my goal to become a leader or a mentor, but year after year, I stepped into more leadership roles and I was successful. So then it was kind of my guide that, okay, maybe this is for me.
you?
I also received a lot of encouragement from teacher colleagues, from staff at my schools, the schools that I worked at, and from admin, specifically when I was in elementary school. So it was kind of, motivating. And I was also influenced by my grandmother, who was a teacher and a principal or headmaster back in Trinidad. And I saw her experience. She would talk about her experiences like with sexism. That was like the main thing there. Like she, the sexism, but she was so vocal about it. And, I'd hear her on the phone ranting and raving, when I was younger, having conversations with my mom and what she's going to do about it. So I feel like I was kind of brought up with this, stand up for what's right. And also my aunt, lastly, she is a university professor and she's the only female in her field. She's a Catholic Black woman married to a Jewish white man. And I saw, the many obstacles that they faced from their 20s onward. Now they're in their 70s. But just she's very outspoken against racism, sexism. So when I see the work that they've done, I felt that it was kind of, I knew that it wasn't easy work, but I felt that it was necessary work. So, but specifically, my journey into administration began when George Floyd was murdered and the Black Lives Matter movement arose. It was during the beginning of the pandemic, and it had a huge impact on the Black community. And then a few Black colleagues and I were surprised that it was so quiet in the schools. Like nobody was talking about it. It was like, we weren't even bringing it up to students, or we weren't like being told that, students could be going through this and we should reach out to them. It was almost like it was silence in schools, and yet you couldn't go anywhere with family or friends if you were Black and not have these conversations. So I personally was worried that students weren't receiving the support that they needed, since it didn't seem to have like a great impact on my colleagues who weren't Black. So at this point, I started to hold some safe space meetings for students to be able to come talk about real life issues. And when we did that, so many other issues came out. So they were talking about, there's not enough racialized administrators in our schools. I wish I had, Black teachers to go to talk about these things. And like, I don't even feel represented in the curriculum, or I'm judged based on how I speak and how I write. And they kind of, felt treated unfairly. If teachers are going to talk to me, it's only about sports or it's about basketball, and things like that. So basically, I felt that, there's a lack of mental health supports in our school. And I decided to bring these issues up to the staff at my school. It wasn't easy because it was my first time speaking publicly in a room of over, 100, mostly white colleagues.
Mhm.
And I was talking about race. So I shared my concerns also with the area superintendent and with Director Brendan Brown. He was even willing to hear my concerns. So I know this wasn't the first time that they heard about these issues, but what these two men, our area superintendent and the director, did was they challenged me to not just talk about these issues or problems, but to actually try to change them, to do something. So they kind of challenged me as in, okay, you see these issues now, but then what can you do? So that, I guess, to answer your question, long-winded answer, but that was the first time that I thought maybe I could become a leader then who can make an even greater impact than just in the classroom. And it was a greater, impact. I was thinking of myself, I'm just a little girl from Scarborough. There's no way that I can, become a principal. But because of the influence that allies were having and telling me that I could, I believed in myself. They helped me believe in myself because they believed in more in me. So for them, it wasn't about like power and positions. It was about equity and justice. So they invited me to sit at their table. So they gave me a seat at their table. And for me, it was kind of feeling like I was being called to do like the impossible. And like, I'm very religious, very spiritual. And I was feeling like this is probably what Moses felt like when he was getting the call to do something way beyond what he thought he could do. He didn't have the language, he didn't have the power. But I was like, I feel like I'm being called. Like there's like pressure on me, and I don't have the language or the, the money or the, the clothing that I'm gonna wear at admin, or I don't have the dialect or that circle. But I felt like, you know what, maybe I am being called by God to do something greater than I could ever imagine. And that's what I did. I put my trust in God, and I knew that He directs our paths in ways that we might not know why. But I felt that God would be with me along the journey, so that I started my journey towards admin, and I never looked back. And I do believe that I've been called to serve, not only my Black community, but all students. And I do see things from like a unique lens because of my lived experiences. So month by month, my confidence grows as a leader and as a mentor. And I do see the impact that I'm making in the lives of students and staff, parents, and colleagues.
And that kind of dovetails, like that was just that was intense. That was amazing. Going from right back from Trinidad all the way back to you being called. And what kept echoing in the back of my head is, Jeremiah 29:11. I have a plan for you. What's the plan? When's those doors going to open up? And I don't know how many times I talk to people who are candidates or want to be thinking of teachers, I could teach you the curriculum, but I can't teach you passion. And that's what just coming across is that passion that you have over there. And it kind of flows into a couple of the other questions that we have is like, what is authentic allyship? You had mentioned that, you had those people that were, telling you is leadership there, etc. When you got that call to sit at that table and you're like, they're actually going to hear me. Like really want to hear what I say. They may not like what I say, but we gotta get uncomfortable to try to change the narrative. What is all that authentic allyship, and knowing that you might make a little people uncomfortable, but it's for the long-term plan.
Yes. Well, for me, I believe the first step to authentic allyship is kind of what you said at the beginning, about acknowledging your position in the world and, your unconscious biases and not being colorblind. And like you said, understanding your privilege. So I think that true allyship is acknowledging that not everyone comes from the same background. Everyone, even if you have the same cultural backgrounds, we all have different lived experiences, and that it's very important to understand when your background and experience comes from privilege compared to others. So I think the first step in being an ally is acknowledging that. I feel that true allies, as the superintendent and director did, they listen to the other. They listen to the voices of those who might not normally have a seat at their table, like me. And they listen with an open heart, not judgmental. They're okay to hear things they might not like, but they don't shut you down. They're open to hearing different perspectives, and they're open to receiving feedback. So I do feel that, the circle that I have in our board, those that are at the top, those are in leadership right now, they are actually open to receiving feedback, even when it is hard to receive. I also think an ally is somebody who reads, not just one, like one media like the National Post, but reads, they research, they respond, they understand like structural racism, so they take things personal, and then they better understand like how their actions impact others. And I talked about learning, but I also think a true ally is really willing to unlearn things that they've learned. And I mean, lastly, for me, true allyship involves action. So it's one thing to speak, to listen, but then you also have to like act. And it could be, as protesting, but it could also be something as speaking out against a microaggression, or, volunteering for a nonprofit organization, or like leading a school's Black Student Association, even if they're not Black. So I think true allies don't leave all the anti-racism work to those who are racialized, but that they're willing to stand up, they're willing to educate themselves, they're willing to join in solidarity to create a more just school system and equitable society.
And I think that's a great point over there. I've worked with some colleagues, and we have a Black graduation coach here. And it's like, well, I have to do all of February is all me. It's like, no, it's not on you. We have a multitude of people here in backgrounds that, we have to embrace that diversity regardless. And how do we try to build into it? And I think that's a really important thing when it comes to hearing the voices. And sometimes you're spoken to rather than listened to. And I think that's a big break. But also, as you put it, that unlearning. How do you unlearn those things? People are not born with a bias. It's something that they've seen, something that they grew up with, whether it's intention or not, because of privilege or just social economic situations or gender roles, etc. But how do we break down those walls and really again go back to, as I said before, the Beatitudes, do unto others, right? As Christ has shown. So looking at those pieces where that voice is so important, do you think enough's being done to recognize Black voices in the Catholic education system? Because I'm still learning in my journey as I'm going. I'm always going to be learning because it never stops. You don't get a certificate and say, "Look, I'm not." The question becomes, are we doing enough, or is there ways we could improve it so it's not just a tick box? And that's the one thing I don't like. I don't like tick boxes.
Mhm. Yes. Well, from what I've seen, I do feel that the Catholic Board is making great strides in this area, but of course, there's still more work to do. Some ways that spaces are being created for Black voices are through, like, we have racialized teacher groups that gather together and talk about issues. We have this year started a racialized mentorship group for elementary and high school vice principals and principals, and we meet monthly as well. There are parent discussion groups that are facilitated by the superintendent of equity. I personally feel that my voice is heard now that I have a seat at the table, but I do feel that there are staff that are still not heard because they're not in that position. So, for example, I don't know how much support staff like EAs and child and youth workers, I feel that there needs to still be space. They still need to be comfortable and accepted, their voices at the table. So hopefully one day all Black staff in all divisions will have their voices recognized and feel comfortable speaking up and standing up for what's right. What I do like is the dismantling anti-Black racism strategy strand of our school board's equity action plan. Saying all those words out of acronyms is like,
There's an
um,
acronym for everything.
yes, I know. So I do love that it promises to hire more Black staff, which is great. It promises to ensure more representation in the curriculum. It promises to provide more anti-racism training for staff. It promises to reduce the over surveillance of discipline of Black and how would I say it? The disproportionate discipline of Black students and how they're over surveilled. There's over surveillance among the Black students. So they're cracking down on that in terms of the number of suspensions and the progressive discipline for Black students. The plan is also strengthening the trust in the Black community and providing mental health supports. So I think that now that our school board has great leaders who are, I'm not saying it didn't before, I'm just saying I can feel the difference having these leaders who are putting words into actions. They're putting the plan into action. I see it. I work directly with the equity superintendent. So I see it, I feel it. I see it by, when I go to these meetings and see more representation. I see it in the hiring practices with most schools, but I can only speak to the Scarborough schools because those are the only ones that I really experience. So I think that there's a lot happening, but of course, there could be more. For example, there should be a way to reach university students so that they want to come to the Catholic board. One of the limiting things is having a priest letter. There are a lot of students who, if they've gone off for university or they're no longer attending their church regularly or their priest doesn't know them and they can't get a priest letter, the Toronto Catholic District School Board loses them to the public school board. So I feel that we're losing quite a few racialized potential teachers to other boards because of a priest letter. So maybe that can change somehow in the future. But I do think that we're on the right track in our Catholic school board.
Would you say that there's less barriers from what I'm hearing right now, but when you were a student, when you were trying to, like you were saying, you went from K to 12 as a student over there and you've seen the evolution of it. Do you think that the barriers are slowly coming down to becoming a racialized leader in schools? Or like if you were going to give advice to a student grade 10 coming up to you saying, you're awesome, I want to be just like you, I want to go into this, what advice would you give them? And knowing what some of those barriers may be, how to navigate from one end, but then also how do we reduce those barriers to eliminate them?
So I feel that when I was in high school, if you were Black, this is how we felt. If you were Black, you go to college. That was the door that you go to. I actually only received the college application, even though my marks were in the 80s. I was in French immersion. I had OAC courses. I had everything I needed to go to university. But when it came to picking up the application package, I, with my friends, were only given the college application, and my mom didn't know any better. So I went to college and I sat in college for 3 years. I took child and youth work because I knew I wanted to work with children. And it was super easy. I was getting 90s. It was boring. And that's when I thought, oh, maybe I should go to university. So I feel like don't think, I think that the barrier of applying to university in the first place uh, is slowly peeling away because now people are more vocal. Now with the de-stream classes, the grade 8 teacher can't just push kids into certain streams. So I feel that that barrier slowly is coming down and that parents are becoming more aware of the opportunities and that if you need to be. So I think a grade 10 needs to know that if you go to college, there's certain careers. If you go to university, there's some other careers. So what you should be taking is courses in the stream of the career you think you want to get into. So if you take academic level courses, you kind of open more doors. And if you take applied level courses, you probably want to work with your hands or want to get more into the skills and the trades. So I feel that that's the first piece of advice that grade 10s should know is, and a lot of them don't know that the courses you're taking now have a direct impact on your future career. And so I think that that barrier, and then also when you do get to university, the room itself, I think there were two of us of color in my degree program. So I think that now that universities are giving interviews to racialize, like you can check a box to say that you are racialized and you can get an interview in a different format or, I guess they're trying to balance who's coming in and who isn't. I feel that that is also a help for those trying to get into education. And then thankfully in our school board, if you do check off the box that you are racialized, when you apply, you're guaranteed an interview. So it's not that you'll be hired, but at least you're going to have a chance now at an interview, which is part of the, struggle is a lot of candidates felt like their name was limiting them from even getting an interview, which is big in our community. Like when I named my 3 children, I did have to consider them having a name that is still reflective of our culture, but will this on a resume, will they get an interview? So it's still sad that, in our Black community, we still have to, some of us still have to think of these things. So I think that the fact that anyone who applies in our board can still get an interview also kind of peels back a layer. One of the barriers also comes down. So I think the last one that I'd mention is having a mentor or having somebody to support you in the school building. So I think that high school students really need that go-to person. And it could be anyone. It could be the custodian. It could be the youth worker. It could be the graduation coach. It could be a teacher. I always tell my students and even my colleagues that my mentor in high school was not even Black. She was a white French teacher who taught me 2 or 3 times. But the difference between her and others, she cared. She simply cared. She cared about us. She cared about, how we're doing in our classes. She cared about our family. She cared about our well-being. She taught us and she spoke to us. She had conversations. So just doing something so simple, she made me believe that I can be greater than I am. So having that, high expectation for us and caring. So I think if every high school student has that go-to person that they can create a relationship, that teacher who reaches out to them to create a relationship, they're already ahead because they have that person who will say, well, did you apply for university? Did you apply for college? Did you get your volunteer hours? And I think that's a big part of our racialized or Black community is we don't have that one person in the school who's going to pull us up to that, to be our best.
And when I'm looking at like a couple of the things here, it's like I told you, there are passions there. I could see you jumping back into your memories, remembering that French teacher, right? And Lord knows, while you were mentioning, I'm like, okay, I got 1, 2, 3 teachers at Dante that I remember really, really well. And if it wasn't for them, I would not be here today. And so I'm very truly thankful for that. But when it comes to what does Black excellence like mean to you? What does the heritage mean? Because obviously it's important to you when you're naming your children. You want to keep reflective of it. And I kind of was why well, I didn't have to think about a name for my child's prospects. And the mere fact that you had to, again, just reinforces that the idea of the privilege I have to be aware of. But you're obviously very proud of the Black excellence and heritage. What does it mean to you? And why we only celebrate it in February is one of the basis why we said no, we should celebrate it every day, right? We should have it. We should have it throughout the curriculum and with courses. What does it mean to you? How would you celebrate it? And if you could change the curriculum a little bit, what would you do?
I like that. So, okay, so Black excellence and heritage to me, it means celebrating the achievements and accomplishments of Black women from the past and present. Black excellence in the sports, in arts, in science, in politics, in education. And I mention all of those because sometimes people only look at the sports and the music. So I think they should be recognized and celebrated all year, not only in February, as you said. I think it's very important for the children and youth to learn about the great accomplishments the Black women and men have had from the past so they can see that they too can do great things. There's a sense of pride, that comes when you know someone who looks like you did something great, did something cool, did something, invented something that you use today. It's kind of like when, for any of us, when someone of your own does something great, we're all proud. So, for example, like when the Raptors win, like Torontonians, we're all proud because the Raptors won. And we had no like impact in that, but we're proud. We're from Toronto, right? Or for me, it's like when a Trinidadian's running a race and they win. It's like everybody's celebrating. So for me, like celebrating Black history is like seeing that the great things that people have done, and it's like celebrating with them. It's also about like learning history, celebrating the successes. I think by doing this, we hope that there will be many more good news stories because others are able to see that if this person did this, you can too. You look like them. You can succeed. You can accomplish great things. For me in a school, it means encouraging Black students to use their God-given talents to do great things. Um, you know, one issue we have is the media portrayals of Blackness and Black youth, as, oh, they just like to dance, party, or there's a crime and they're involved, or they all want to play basketball. So I think it's about changing the way media perceives them, and then they think, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be. But it's saying like, no, no, no. Look at all these Black men and women who did this. You too can do this. You don't, it's not like something's wrong with being a rapper or a basketball, but their dreams are so limited to what they think they should do and be. But when they learn about these real life role models of past and present day, then it kind of opens up their eyes to what they can be. And I speak a lot about greatness, but besides even celebrating the great things that people are done, I think that seeing Black excellence in everyday life is important. So, for example, a student at my school, she was born with no hands, and she's able to do everything pretty much that all the other students are doing. She's able to type. She was able to, participate in gym class. So for me, that's an example of Black excellence. Look at what she's able to do. Also, there's, a student in our school who lost their best friend to gun violence a few months ago. And they come to school, they're a part of the basketball team, they smile, they're respectful. Like for me, that's an everyday example of Black excellence because he could be doing something totally different. Or even as I tell my students, we have our student supervisor, who's an older lady, But she comes to work on time every day. She's tirelessly making breakfast for the students, opening the doors, welcoming, people and smiling, and just the joy that she brings. And for me, that's another example of Black excellence, because I don't think they're seeing these examples in the media. So I think that what I would change, though, when you mention that, I think that what I would change curriculum wise is I would have a Black Canadian heritage course that every student is required to take in high school. And in that course, they learn the true history of Blacks in Canada and the contributions of Blacks in Canada. And it will be a place where students can celebrate themselves, but they can also learn. Because I feel that, my mom's generation, which would probably be the students' grandparents' generation, they didn't get the history. If they grew up in the Caribbean, they didn't get their true history. So they don't have it to pass down to the next generation. And then those who are kind of in my generation, we didn't get it because we didn't have it in schools either. So then how do we pass it down to the next generation? So I feel that if there was a course in the high school where they were taught that, so it was one of the compulsory courses where everyone took it, and you learned about Black Canadian history, I feel that that's one important step that the school boards could take.
I like that idea. It kind of goes back to that world religion course that we have at grade 11. Regardless of a Catholic school or not, I still think that's one of the most important courses that we have, because that truly tells you the Catholic Church is a universal church where we embody everybody, and you have to know what everybody is. So I like that idea that you're talking about that curriculum piece. One thing that stuck out to me over there and looking at it is that French teacher of yours that was always there wanting to help you to do this. That reminds me of one of my teachers, Joan Chernow, who ended up being a principal in Toronto Catholic District School Board. And happened fast, I was at a CPCO conference and I saw her and I'm just like, Joan? And she's like, DeSousa? I'm like, oh my God. So it was an incredible thing where she literally, you should go to student council, and that literally set me off on my journey to it. And I there's never enough platitudes I could give to her for what she's done in my life. And that kind of goes into that question is, how do we make our kids feel empowered, right? How do we build that confidence with them? Because everyone's got their face in their phones, or they're going with Instagram, text message, this, that relationship piece is really there. But how do we try to, in our roles as leaders, and specifically in this case, like a racialized, how do we empower your staff and your students to just be themselves and achieve their God-given talents, as you pointed out?
Yes. So for me, one way that I empower staff is I feel that if people aren't sure, they don't want to act. So if teachers don't feel like they have the education or they have the knowledge, they don't know enough about a topic, they don't want to do anything. So they'd rather do nothing at all. So I think that professional development workshops on equity issues, not just race-based, but, on gender, on sexuality, on de-streaming, on, DEI. So ones that if they get the knowledge and they feel comfortable, they feel empowered, they feel comfortable having courageous conversations about issues. I think that that's the first step, is helping to extend the knowledge. Even on the N word, we have an N word protocol now that I worked on with our school board. And it was like teachers would just ignore students saying the word because they didn't know how to approach it.
Yep.
But we were able to have conversations about, this is how some people who are Black feel. This is how others who are Black feel. This is the history of the word. So I feel that now that they have the knowledge and they know what to say if a student says, like, you're not Black, you can't tell me not to use the word, they have like the knowledge and the language to be able to deal with situations like that. I also feel like having conversations about, unconscious bias, about microaggressions, the model minority myth,
Mhm.
those open up a lens and empower teachers to then have those conversations with students. I also feel like fostering like a culture of collaboration, like working together. It's not a top-down approach,
Mhm.
like I hold all the knowledge or the principal holds all the knowledge or whatever the board tells us we're just gonna, do, but kind of, allowing them to share their ideas with each other, their gifts with each other, working in small groups, even students. Like, it's important for students to see that they have knowledge, they have currency, that they know things that we don't know. It's just, certain knowledge is weighed differently and has different currency. So I think making sure that students know that their knowledge, their lived experience is valued,
Mhm.
um, and that they can use it to improve the world, improve their own lives would help. I also think that, for me, I empower others by listening attentively when they do come to me and, trying to give good feedback, and involving teachers in like the decision-making processes, also helps, and students, because it's not just like, you know, my decisions that are going to impact the school. They're out there, they're on the ground.
Mhm.
So if they know that they can make decisions and we support your decision, I think that that empowers them as well. And I think for me, it's most important to foster and encourage a positive school climate, treat everyone with respect, with kindness and understanding. And when they see that, when the staff feel that way, then they are more likely to treat their students in that way.